Recording in progress.
I know, I banged the gavel really hard tonight. I would like to call tonight's meeting of the Tacoma Park City Council to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Searcy.
Here.
Councilmember Fulcher.
Present.
Councilmember Dvala.
I'm here.
Councilmember Gibson.
Here.
Councilmember Siemens. He is here somewhere. Councilmember Hanzak.
Here. At present.
Councilmember Small.
Yes, y'all.
Great. Good evening. And I hear Councilmember Siemens. Good evening, everyone. Just going to do a quick run through of tonight's agenda because we did have to make a modification. So for tonight, we will have public hearings for the speed hump request for Westmoreland Avenue between Elm, Walnut, and the First Ave, and between First Ave and Second Avenue. We will also have a public hearing on the traffic calming in Hillwood Manor Gardens. Wait a minute. No, that's still not right. That's not correct.
That's a mistake.
That is still a
know it's
typo.
Yeah.
Just want to confirm the location of the second traffic calming.
Yeah, it is, sorry. It's a series of intersections in Hillwood Manor.
In Hillwood Manor. Thank you very much. We will also have a presentation this evening, the Low Impact Development Center, LIDC Stormwater Resiliency Study recommendations. We have a voting session, resolution adopting the hazard mitigation plan, as well as an added agenda voting item, resolution authorizing the city manager to execute the National Opioid Settlement Agreement with Kroger, Harris Teeter, and the Opioid Litigation and Maryland Subdivision Agreement. And then we will have work sessions on the traffic calming requests, as well as the youth council appointment recommendations. In terms of upcoming agenda items, on Wednesday, September the 18th, we will be meeting at our regular time of 7:30, and we will have a series of voting sessions that evening. The first is the first reading ordinance approving installation of speed humps for the 6700 and 6800 block of Westmoreland Avenue. First reading ordinance approving traffic calming for the intersections of 13th Ave and Elson Place, 14th Ave and Elson Place, and 14th Avenue and Elson Street. The single reading ordinance approving a contract with the city attorney, the single reading ordinance approving a contract with the legislative advocate, and resolution providing for appointments to the youth council. We will also have two work sessions that evening. The first is for the ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act budget discussion. The second is the FY26 budget schedule. As a reminder for all, on Tuesday, September the 24th, we will have a Housing Strategic Plan Implementation Forum at 7:30 p.m. here in the auditorium. There's also a virtual option, so I want to encourage people to participate. And on Wednesday, September the 25th, the City Council will meet at its regular time. We will start with a proclamation in honor of Walk to School Day, which is October the 9th. We will have a series of voting sessions, second reading ordinance approving the installation of speed humps for the 6700 and 6800 block of Westmoreland Ave. The second reading ordinance approving the traffic calming for the intersections of 13th Ave and Elson Place, 14th Ave and Elson Place, and 4th Avenue and Elson Street. And then we will also have two work sessions that evening. The first is the quarterly financial report for the fourth quarter, and tentatively, we will have a work session on restricted covenants. And just as a reminder, on Wednesday, October the 2nd, Rosh Hashanah begins at sunset, and also the council will not meet that evening. So with that, we are going to move into our public hearings for this evening. The first item is speed hump request for Westmoreland Avenue between Elm and Walnut, and First Avenue, and between First Avenue and Second Avenue. Do we have anyone here for the public hearing for the traffic calming efforts on Westmoreland?
Hello.
Hello. got you all mic'd up. You ready to go?
Okay, all right, great, thank you. I'm Andrea Pearson from Ward 3. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I support all aspects of the petition except for the 3 speed humps. After presenting some information, I'll conclude with a compromise proposal. Conditions on the street. My partner and I have lived at 6618 Westmoreland Avenue at the corner of First Avenue since 2008. This corner is a two-way stop that requires traffic on Westmoreland to stop and yield to traffic on First Avenue. There are daily violations of this stop, from rolling stops to blowing through the intersection. I've asked the city for help with these ongoing violations, including most recently the installation of signage such as "cross traffic does not stop" or something to that effect, to emphasize the obligation to comply. Speed bumps. Despite the proven ability of humps to calm traffic, they have disadvantages beyond simple inconvenience, frustration, maintenance costs, and delays for emergency vehicles, as revealed in compelling research about environmental impact. This research is variable in regard to approach and road conditions, vehicle and fuel types, etc., yet substantive, consistent, and useful information is emerging. An article published in the Civil Engineering Journal in July, which is a peer-reviewed Q1 journal, 27% acceptance rate, verified earlier findings documenting a rise in fuel consumption when vehicles were made to slow down and then reaccelerate, over 37% in one test involving cars. They also found a corresponding rise in toxic emissions, especially carbon monoxide, and discussed the contribution of the toxins to climate change. These harmful chemicals, concentrated first at the site of the humps, will be released every day in perpetuity, and of course they will not be contained. This affects the entire neighborhood and beyond, and no one should be made subject to it. Therefore, I propose that the council modify the petition to take advantage of traffic calming by enforcement of the stop at Westmoreland and First. This intersection is located between the proposed humps, with 2 on one side and 1 on the other, and could function similarly in traffic calming when drivers who have to stop there anyway complied with the signs I've suggested. Signage could be augmented by pedestrian crossings, as my neighbor John will discuss in a minute. I hope the council will consider this option, which provides traffic calming without contributing to climate change and while keeping the air we all breathe cleaner. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else here for the public hearing on traffic calming? Come on down.
Good evening, council members. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. My name is John Brescia. I'm on First Avenue right off of Westmoreland. I want to open by saying that I fully understand that folks are concerned about pedestrian safety, and I too want our residents to be safe and live happy and healthy lives. So there's no daylight between us here on that point. I think we just disagree about exactly how we ought to go about achieving the goal. That's all. And so my view, very similar to my neighbors, breaks down along 3 points. The risk right now, I think, has been undersubstantiated for something as, in my view, invasive as 3 speed bumps in such a short range. So absent additional information on that front, I would look then to point 2, trade-offs, because everything in life, including these speed bumps, comes with trade-offs. And here, as you've heard, there's environmental impact, there's the obvious cost of maintenance and installation, as well as the assumed annoyance of drivers who are going up and down the street every day on their way to work or delivering things. And so, given that there's undersubstantiated, in my view, risk, and then also trade-offs on the side of installing speed bumps, I would recommend point 3, an alternative. And that alternative does also involve, as you just heard, the stop signs at First and Westmoreland. They provide a natural physical break for traffic moving down Westmoreland. So what one could do is enforce those signs more stringently. And there's a way that I think that could be done without, say, involving police monitoring or cameras, right? Expensive things and invasive things. Rather, you could install, for example, a raised crosswalk, raised pedestrian crossing, or some sort of elevation in the road at that point. That would create, 1, a requirement that people obey the signs. They effectively become self-enforcing. It then causes people, as folks who want the speed bumps want them to do, to come to a stop at these signs to slow down, lowering the overall speed on the road at any given time and preventing people from simply building up speed and blowing through the signs. This, I think, would capture the majority, if not all, of the safety benefits that people are looking for out of these speed bumps. But it would also avoid some of the countervailing deficits of the 3 speed bump plan. So again, absent new information, that's my stance. I stand in opposition to the existing plan as written and would request you review and amend it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mayor, I apologize, but as a point of order, can we fill people in on where we are on this? Because I think that the advocate or the regular procedure of how we got to this place is the thing that they're responding to, but no one knows what that is really.
That will be discussed, Councilmember Small, during the work session. That is
Like later today. All right.
correct. Do we have any other public comments on the speed hump request in Westmoreland?
Hello, my name is Jim Walsh. I live on Westmoreland Avenue. I am really happy to be here. I moved to the community in December, and I love being a part of the Tacoma Park community. I love the value that the community has on really local input and the walkability of the town. In living here, one of the things that myself and many of my neighbors found is that while many cars do actually go under the, at the speed limit, which is actually 25, which is probably too high and something we should evaluate, there are a number of cars that don't. And we and myself, we have a 5-year-old. And there's a lot of families on the block who got together and said, we need to do this to make sure our kids are safe. And one of the things we found out is that traffic calming measures are pretty commonplace throughout Tacoma Park. If you look at a map of traffic calming measures, there's a big hole over Westmoreland where there is no traffic calming measures within that area. And so if you look at the map, you can Google Tacoma Park traffic calming, and there's a great picture on the city website there. We've seen kids increase in the neighborhood. There's must be a dozen kids under the age of 10 in the 2-block area where these speed bumps will go that weren't there a few years ago. Anecdotally, I collected most of the petition signatures in the block, talked to a lot of people about this, a lot of anecdotal feedback about the increase in traffic that we've seen there post-pandemic and the closing of Laurel Ave in that section there, and that noticeable traffic increases from residents. And so, we set out to do something about that, and we're appreciative of having this process to actually talk about this. And in doing that, we also got to interact with the Public Works Director, Daryl, who was amazing, came out and actually helped us think through what we actually need to bring comprehensive safety there, and actually talked to us through the issues with the intersection that we didn't even envision as being part of this, about what we can do to actually improve the intersection at Westmoreland and Walnut, and the intersection at Elm and Westmoreland, which are significantly dangerous. I actually walked that with a group of my neighbors this evening, looking at the traffic safety there, and their cars just blow through there. And I don't think anybody's being nefarious. I think it's just, it's not very well managed in general. And so this talked about enforcement is certainly important. We collected feedback from our neighbors at a community meeting, got massive public support for it. Not everyone, but majority of outpouring of support. You all should have received from the WACO organization about support there. And we also submitted an online form that we put up on street signs around to solicit feedback. Got about 30 comments from there, overwhelmingly supportive of speed bumps and the other measures in there. So I ask you to think about the fact that we're really a group of parents who took it upon ourselves to try to do what we can to make our streets a little bit safer for our kids. And we do have a lot of support for this in the neighborhood. And I appreciate that there's a lot of support within Tacoma Park for making these streets safe for walking and pedestrians and our children. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I do just want to confirm that we did receive the letter from the WACO community. Do we have any other comments for the public hearing of speed hump requests on Westmoreland Ave?
Good evening. My name is Tamar Greenspan. I'm Jim's neighbor as well at 6801 Westmoreland Avenue. And I want to put an even finer point on a few of the things that Jim said, because I think that these are a very important thing. I have a background in urban planning, and one of the first things I noticed when we bought our house in late 2019 is how long that block of Westmoreland is that goes between Elm, Walnut, and down to First. It's a long block with that curve, and it invites speeding. It's a downhill coming from the main district, but really in the middle of the block where Jim and I live, in the 6 houses, 3 on his side, 3 on mine, we have a little bit of a hot spot. We may need to test the water. We've got 9 children under the age of 6. You know, I don't know what's going on, but we've got a lot of small people who don't have a lot in the way of self-preservation instincts. And so it's this middle of the block where cars are going at their fastest that is the most concerning to me and to the, you know, to the immediate neighbors around us. The stop sign enforcement at the corner of First is also important. I think that's kind of a progressive check as we get down to that other lower block. But the middle of the block is where we see school buses, ironically, are some of the worst offenders bombing down the road. Commercial vehicles as well, trucks, deliveries, they easily hit 30, 35 miles an hour in the middle of the block. So when you have my son trying to run across the street to Jim's house, his daughter running across the street to my house, 35 miles an hour is too fast to stop for a little person darting across the street. Now, of course, we are trying to teach them appropriate street crossing behavior, and we do take that responsibility very seriously. But for all of us, it's a quality of life issue of having cars going 35 miles an hour and a narrow street between us, but it's also truly a safety issue. And when we talk about trade-offs, you know, none of us wants to be here talking about trade-offs when it comes to human lives. So I will leave it with that. I appreciate you taking the time to take a look at it, and I appreciate the engagement of all the neighbors. This has been a very positive experience of actually just getting out and getting to know one another. So we've enjoyed that as well.
Thank you so much. Do we have any more public comments on the speed hump request for Westmoreland? Do we have any virtual?
We're online.
We do have
We're
some
virtual. We have comments. Should we go ahead?
Yes, please.
I believe remember.
Great. Hi there. I'm Ellie Kupler. We're at 6711 Westmoreland. This is my 2-year-old. My spouse is here too. We lived here for 10 years. And we are, like Jim and Tamar, part of that cluster of parents on between our, she went home already. Oh gosh, put me in safeguarding mode. Okay, sorry about that, toddler. So we're really supportive of the proposals, including the speed bumps. It just takes one camera. It just takes one car going too fast, one delivery truck, one person who doesn't know the neighborhood or maybe isn't paying attention. We have 20 parents of kids under the age of 8 on our group thread in just the 2-block radius. We see cars going fast all the time. We know it's not our neighbors. We know that it's still happening, and it only takes one car doing that one time for something tragic to happen. We have another child due in 9 days, and my partner works together with our neighbors on this, despite having stage 4 lung cancer, because they believe the danger to the kiddos is quite high in our otherwise really peaceful neighborhood, where we love letting them play, letting them explore, letting them know their neighbors. There's just structural things we have to do to make our 2-block area safer, and the plan that got proposed was comprehensive, it was thoughtful, and we're strongly in support of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our best wishes to you and your family.
Yeah, familiar.
Thank you.
We have Rebecca Wall next.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I will just add to the comments made by my neighbors. I also live on this stretch of the block with the infestation of small children. One of the things I love about living in Tacoma Park is its sense of fairness and equity. And when you look at the map of speed bumps across the city, what you'll see is Westmoreland is an outlier in that we're one of the only blocks that doesn't have speed bumps on it currently. In fact, we have no traffic calming measures whatsoever. I think as a result of that, when cars get to our area, they do tend to speed up because it's one of the few places that don't have speed bumps and don't have traffic calming. The intersection at Walnut and Westmoreland is particularly dangerous. On a daily basis, I am almost hit by cars there. And then the cars wave at me as if they're doing me a favor by letting me cross the street as they roll through the stop sign. There's no zebra crossings. There's no recognition that people are there. And there's multiple blind spots where cars can't see each other and they can't see pedestrians. So dealing with that first intersection, dealing with the speed around the street, as my other neighbors have said, making sure that there's traffic calming measures are in place, both from a safety point of view, but also an equity point of view for comparison to our neighbors throughout the city. I do hear my neighbors' concerns about the pollution and the environment, but I would say if that is the standard we're going to hold traffic bumps to, then the city would need to tear up traffic bumps around the rest of the town, because when you look at that map, it is literally almost every single block. And I'll just echo what my neighbors have said about the safety of the children. We do our very best to make sure that they are not running in front of cars, but they're small children and they want to play on the street and they want to go across the street to see their neighbors. And 25, 35 miles an hour, it's impossible to keep safety when the cars are going just that fast. I mean, that's the speed limit on Carroll. We have the same speed limit on our residential street that the commercial stretches of Carroll do. So thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other virtual public comments?
We do. We have, before we get to Jeremy Swartz, I think we have Rachel Cohen. Do you see her on?
She's right.
Hi, thanks for this opportunity to speak. I've been listening to the arguments made by my neighbors. I live at 6602 Westmoreland, and I'm a parent of a young child as well. I just want to echo what everyone has said about the need for better enforcement of the stop signs and the intersections, particularly that intersection at Walnut and Westmoreland is incredibly dangerous. People roll through that stop sign every day. They do not look, and even despite the bumps that slow you down coming down Walnut toward Westmoreland, it's like as soon as they hit that stop sign, they roll right through it. That said, I did want to note that I do not support the speed bump on the 6600 block of Westmoreland. I think the short block there and the end where it comes into 2nd Avenue sort of serves as a natural check along with the narrowness of the street. That is my own personal experience, having lived on this block for 4 years. That said, I certainly see cars zooming down the 67 and 6800 blocks every day, and so I also think it is possible to look at a version of this plan that has some of those speed bumps, but not necessarily all 3 that have been proposed. Thanks, that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much.
One last comment. It's a video comment.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor Susie and members of the Council. My name is Jeremy Schwartz, and I'm a resident of Ward 3. It was important to me to speak to you this evening to express my strongest possible support for the proposed traffic calming measures on Westmoreland Avenue. I live on Orchard Avenue, just a couple of blocks away from Westmoreland, and so I walk up and down Westmoreland nearly every day, sometimes more than once a day. And often I'm walking with my son in his stroller, so as a parent, I'm particularly attuned to the safety issues that are present there. For many of us in Ward 3, Westmoreland Avenue is one of our main pathways to the Old Tacoma Business District, as well as to the Metro Station and Tacoma DC. It is also home to local businesses such as People's Book and the House of Musical Traditions. It's where we have the Tacoma Urban Park playground as well. But most importantly, Westmoreland Avenue is a primarily residential street where people live. In particular, I have found the Westmoreland Avenue and Walnut Avenue intersection to be especially challenging to navigate. I have experienced confusion about how, when, and where to safely cross through this intersection because it has such a complicated plan. I have also seen drivers confused about when and where to stop while I am crossing the street. The recommended Continental Crosswalk will be a significant improvement, and the Westmoreland and Walnut intersection does need improvement. I understand that public works has been considering a raised intersection as well as curb ramp adjustments on Westmoreland. I appreciate the work of Director Braithwaite and her team on this, and I hope that these needed changes will be made. Having gotten to know Westmoreland Avenue very well, I feel strongly that all three of the proposed speed humps are needed. Westmoreland runs parallel to Eastern Avenue and has become a cut-through toward New Hampshire Avenue. It has an unusually high volume of car traffic for a residential street. I see this every day, and I believe the speed humps will make a significant difference. As you know, the Westmoreland area community has been particularly concerned about cut-through traffic in the context of the potential expansion of the Laurel Avenue streetery. I fully support the expansion of a thoughtfully designed public open space on Laurel Avenue, and I hope that it will happen soon. And at the same time, it is so important that we put in place all of the needed measures to support safe streets in the surrounding community. Thank you very much for considering this proposal.
Okay. Do we have any other public comments as it relates to Westmoreland? Great. Thank you all so much. I hope you can stick around for the work session. If not, we will be live streaming it. Do we have, next up is traffic calming in Hillwood Manor. Do we have anyone here to speak on behalf of traffic calming? Wonderful.
Hi, I'm Amy Weselick. I live in Ward 6 in the Hillwood Manor neighborhood, and I wanted to come to speak on behalf of our neighborhood association in support of the changes that I put before the city council tonight. So thank you for considering these. Our neighborhood association met with Darrell Braithwaite this past January and came up with a brainstorming of ideas of how to improve our neighborhood, in particular because the infestation has hit our neighborhood too. We have a lot of little children. And one of the main things that came of these discussions was that a lot of our intersections are very wide. They were built and designed this way. But what it means is that cars often just kind of zip right through. And I think 2 of the 3 proposed intersections have stop signs, but 1 does not. But regardless, it's really easy to just do the curve and not see what's on the other side. So I'm speaking in support of that. I also wanted to say that we've already seen a series of changes. There has been a new stop sign added at 14th and Erskine. There's been no parking signs put up in several spots, which was a real safety concern for Elson Court, which is a very short cul-de-sac. So that is a really good thing, as well as new street name signs and some City of Tacoma Park signs at the edge of Montgomery County, so that when you cross over, you can see that you're now in Montgomery County and Tacoma Park. So I just wanted to thank everyone who's worked on it, and I want to give a really special thanks to Colleen Bozzi, the president of our neighborhood association, who worked really hard on these, as well as Darrell. I think the 2 of them worked closely to make these happen, and I'm really excited you all will be discussing them tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other public comments on traffic calming in Hillwood Manor? And no remote? Okay, great. Next up, we have public comments on voting items. And just as a reminder for folks, voting items for this evening is a resolution adopting the hazard mitigation plan and a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute the national opioid settlement agreement with Kroger, Harris Teeter in the opioid litigation and Maryland subdivision agreement. Any public comments on voting items? Okay, no virtual comments on voting items? Wonderful. All right, we're going to move on to general public comments. Do we have any general public comments this evening?
Colleen Cordes, Ward 1. Please rethink your plan to pass a whole set of housing tax credits by the end of October in the midst of contested elections and continuing turnover at the top of our housing staff. Doing so would be poorly timed, given that a majority of council seats could change hands the very next month, but it would also be unwise and literally out of order. Recall the churning at the highest level of city staffing over your 2-year term, not just in city managers, but also at the top of housing and community development. Just a week ago, Director Ira Cowler left. That puts you at serious disadvantage in trying to evaluate these particular credits, especially understanding the idea of, under his supervision, how staff came up with immediately passing just these isolated tax credits before staff has been able to present you with the far more comprehensive, deep, data-rich analysis you need first. An analysis, not just a laundry list of existing programs, of all current as well as potential city, county, state, and even relevant federal housing policies that you have to work with or may soon have to work with. And how city policies based on rigorous analysis, not general assumptions or assertions, interact with these other levels of policy. That would include how city housing policies and programs are working or not working toward the goals of the 2019 council vision, strategic vision, with potential changes besides tax credits that should be considered. And how all of these policies are likely to interact with each other, things you might consider in terms of tenant protections and the housing fund, as well as tax credits and other possibilities like, community land trust. So critically, that would require special attention to analyzing not just intended positive consequences, but unintended negative ones. County housing policies in particular are in extreme flux right now. Where is the analysis of the full set of city policies that we will need to enhance the positive potential of those changes and to minimize things like, the attainable housing strategies and the government infrastructure program, those county things, how to maximize the positive things and minimize the negative impacts, and also how should the city be advocating on those particular issues. And then also looking at what is the impact already of the MMPA. How does the MMPA play with these proposed tax credits, as well as other changes that you might be proposing for housing policies? And I raise that because there's a question of, would proposed tax credits exacerbate the MMPA's incentives to tear down existing affordable buildings, especially those in need of repairs, and so increase the risk of displacement? And just to remind you that our eviction rate in Tacoma Park is more than twice what the county's eviction rate is. So doing tenant protections is urgent, more urgent than new tax credits for market rate rental units. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comments general public comments? Okay, any virtual general public comments this evening? Okay, great. All right, so we're going to move on to council comments. Do we have any council comments this evening? Okay, Councilmember Small.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I usually try to go first on these because the overall formulation of the day, sometimes I get a chance to explain. I wouldn't ordinarily, given the circumstances, be in what some people would consider a leisure suit, but I have a disability or chronic illness, and I can't have on a belt today. And so I had to change. They could tell you I was dressed up better before. And so I just wanted to say that in advance. And I'm going to try and make this 235 count. Because what I want to talk about is that there's a real irony to trying to do the right thing and do right by people. Because every situation changes a little bit. And so I wanted to talk about two things in national politics that have direct import as to what we do here today. And that is, first, Tyreek Hill. In the middle of some of these things, you've seen that maybe a famous football player got pulled out of a car and whatever else. And procedurally, there was one really important part of that he said, which is, and I think I'm quoting him actually, he said, "I should do what everyone else has to do." And that is the way that I could have prevented this situation from going awry. But the fact of the matter is, you can't necessarily guarantee the situation wouldn't have gone awry, but at least that window thing wouldn't have happened. And so there are a lot of things like that that happen in national politics, and those 10 things have direct import on the way we see things and do things and shape things here. A lot of times procedurally, when you're dealing with a lot of information from a lot of departments and there are gaps because of communication strategies or different organizations, if you're up here, the gaps fall in your lap. And then you got to deal with what the gap says and who's responsible for it, whether it's a big deal, not a big deal. And those things can be difficult, and sometimes they're political, and sometimes they're policy, and sometimes they're both. But the second part of this that I wanted to talk about is that from my perspective, in trying to do what everyone else should have to do, one of the things about that is observing what the rules are and or applying more rules and applying them fairly. And in this situation, I want to talk about people who talk about that immigrants are eating cats. We live in a weird world, and it's a shame that we have modern politics that are national in the way that they are. But the fact of the matter is people get on national TV and they espouse things that have direct import into the lives of the people who live in my ward or live directly adjacent to my ward. And I can talk about the othering that I see and feel for those people every day because I go over there every day. And one of the things that I've been talking about consistently up here is the inconsistency by which we deal with these things of equity and fairness. And the result of othering people because we want them to be here, but we don't know how to interact with them, not unlike being a smart black guy. And so what I want to say to you guys all, and particularly with regard to your issues, the issues in my ward, and the omnipresent issues that we've had with regard to traffic and traffic calming. Some of these are demographic, some of them are related to changes in patterns of the way people live. And we've been trying really hard to get them done. If you live in Ward 6 and you see all the stuff that has happened, if you live in Ward 6 and you see those signs, that is directly because our city manager went and took a drive with me. And I showed him all the places where we were being, quote unquote, left out. And that's how those things got up there. With regard to some of these things that are happening today, I took myself out of the process because up here, it was confusing enough that I didn't want to affect adversely anybody's right to have the same things that everyone else has. And so as we move forward here, I can't wait to talk about this traffic thing because there's larger structures here. We got a white paper coming for Ward 6 that is really great, includes all of the parts of the ward because we needed to talk about it. What you said just now is one of the best public presentations that we have had while I have been here, because these are the real issues. And a lot of times we don't get to them because we get caught up in a lot of these other things. But I want to thank the people who come in here seriously to do these things without agendas, without malice, and without ambition. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Small. Councilmember Gibson.
Yes, first of all, I want to thank the Ward 3 residents, Westmoreland Avenue, and around that area. Thank you for your discussion, your comments tonight, and I thank the neighborhood that got together, pulled itself together to get the petition signed, to get our Public Works Director out there to walk with you. It shows initiative. It shows the power of local neighborhoods getting together and supporting what you have mentioned. What was mentioned was quality of life and safety. So I am fully supporting that. I recognize and I thank the commenters that talked about trade-offs. Every single decision we make has trade-offs. I think that we have to look hard at that, and we will discuss it further tonight what those trade-offs are. But I think the presentation and the comments were well taken. The work that's gone into pulling it together, I really appreciate that. I also want to say I support Colleen Cordes' comments with regard to delaying any vote on tax credits. I haven't had a chance to talk at length with my colleagues here, but I will. I for the reasons that Colleen mentioned in terms of staff turnover, in terms of elections, in terms of the need for more data, we can't be pushing this through too quickly. We need to have the community on board and the council on board with all the facts needed that help us understand what's going on in our community and as it relates with the county and state around us. So I want to thank Colleen for her comments. We'll revisit that later.
Thank you, Councilmember Gibson. Councilmember DeBala?
Yes, thank you. I had first a couple of thank yous for, first for the folk festivals, for city staff, from all the departments, for the musicians, and especially the many community volunteers. It took so many people to make that thing happen, and it was so great. I had such a good time, and everybody I talked to was smiling as well. So thank you, particularly city staff. Secondly, I thought the nominating caucus last night was an example of local democracy in action that was refreshing. So thanks to the city clerk and all the folks who pulled that together, and the election board and all the folks who pulled that together. I have comments on traffic calming. I'll hold them till we get to that. And just by way of some of the comments on housing, since it's not on the agenda, I note that there is, I think, in partial response to my asking for it, a summary of tenant protections that currently exist in Tacoma Park just went up, I think this morning, on the city website. So thank you for that. That's not data and analysis and all the, the things you were talking about, but at least there's something to work with. And I appreciate that. And because I think I remember a different answer on eviction rates in the city, I was hoping if the city staff could provide us with some data on eviction rates, comparative eviction rates. Thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you, Councilmember DeBala. Councilmember Siemens?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to take a minute to thank the Sons of the American Revolution for recognizing the work that I've done here in the community and honoring me with a good citizenship medal.
Yeah.
Well deserved.
Well deserved.
Thank you. And they did it even before they found out I was leaving.
Yeah, wonderful.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Siemens. Councilmember Fulcher?
Thank you. Going out of order of when things happened, I want to especially thank Jesse Carpenter for last night. I don't know if anybody
understanding that that is a day of beginnings in Ethiopian culture, and we have a lot of Ethiopians in our community. What's that?
I said you should read the Kebra
I should. I would like to know more about it. And I wanted to also say thank you for last weekend's festival. Thank you to the staff, and thank you to all the volunteers that helped out. It was a beautiful, beautiful day. We got lucky with the weather. I also got to enjoy this weekend, the Jumanji. I'm sorry that the staff found themselves with a little bit of technical difficulty, but they made do, and it was still tons of fun. So thank you to the staff who made that possible. And on Monday night, earlier this week, there was an excellent tenants' rights forum that was held at Long Branch, hosted by Councilmember Kate Stewart, that I had the ability to attend. And I just wanted to share with everyone how inspiring it was. There were at least 50 attendees, and that is not counting more than 30 or maybe even 50 resource people that were there. It was highly educational, and I think one of the things I found most inspiring about it was that they did simultaneous translation for every single person in the room, and everyone had headsets on. And a lot of people took advantage of this technology, and it made the meeting move very quickly, but most importantly, everyone was feeling connected. If you were a native English speaker, there were speakers on the panel who were able to speak in Spanish to the constituents directly, and those who didn't understand them could put the headsets on and have it translated into English. So that was really, really neat, and I thought I found out how much it costs today, actually, on a call. It cost $1,000 for 3 hours to have the headsets plus translation for 3 hours. So something for us to think about as a city, I think.
Done it in the past.
Yeah, and anyway, and there was lots of great material there. That again, food for thought. Our own housing staff was there. Thank you to our housing staff for being at that meeting as well as a resource to our people from all. There were people from Ward 5 and people from all around the Long Branch area beyond our city. And so thank you, Colleen, for your comments on housing. I do think there's a lot of really good stuff there. And thank you to those people who came out about the Westmoreland. I'm looking forward to that conversation soon. I'll have more to say. Please, this weekend, consider coming out to Long Branch Festival, Friday night, 5 to 9, Saturday, 11 to 9. It's the funnest event of the year at Long Branch. It's the most resources are put into that, besides Flower Avenue, of course.
Great. Thank you so much, Councilmember Honzak. So one of the joys of going last is you don't have to expand upon things that are already mentioned too much. But I want to join my colleague in recognition of September the 11th. I still, right to this day, remember where I was that moment when the planes hit the World Trade Center, and I can actually share. I was working in undergrad at a hotel, watching someone who was in town in Georgia for an interview talk to his wife, who was in the World Trade Center, and then saw the building fall. That is where I was, watching him mourn. So this is a day that still stays in my memory, and definitely want to acknowledge it. I also, sadly enough, did not, during our last meeting, have a moment of silence for the school shooting that happened in Georgia, Malapachee's high school shooting. And I had to have a moment of recognizing that this has become so common that this particular story wasn't really top news, and I get it. There's a lot of things that are happening, accusations of pet eating, but it is really sad to say when we're at a point in this country where children are going to school, and that should be one of the safest places where they should be able to be, and they have to fear for their lives. It is sad, and definitely, we as a country should make sure that we're voting not just based on one issue, but based on the greatest needs of our nation. So just want to acknowledge that. Festivals, yes. So definitely the Folk Festival was amazing. I'm really appreciative of the organizers. I got a chance to kick it off and also had a booth. And so it was a really, really, really great time. I also want to thank Javier Rivas and Eric for hosting the city, our police chief, deputy chief, as we did and Councilmember Small was there. Last week as we did a walk through the Crossroads area, talking to the businesses and their experiences with crime in that area. It was very informative. I want to send my sincerest appreciation to every single business owner. We had a chance to also go to Centronia to talk to the staff there about the challenges that they are having, and just want to share in our commitment to making sure that we're addressing those issues in the Crossroads. Want to echo appreciation of staff and our Board of Elections and folks for facilitating an amazing nominating caucus. I will say that probably was the first nominating caucus where everyone was of like mind. Get out by 9. Get out by 9. And so I appreciate everyone running that meeting very efficiently. So thank you so much to our city clerk. Also, Montgomery College, I just want to echo, I will be speaking at the ribbon cutting, so please come out. But also, I'm so appreciative for Montgomery College doing the ice cream social this week, just as a way to celebrate the community and all of the partnership that we've been able to have during construction. So definitely look forward to that. All right, moving to this weekend. I know a few of my colleagues and I will be attending the Adventist Community Services Gala, so we're looking forward to that. And also, I will be a judge, the pie eating contest. So I am excited about that. I always ask, why would you have a judge that has food allergies?
You just
But-
stand further back.
Yeah. But they make sure that I never get to touch the crab pies, so, which is great. Lastly, do want to talk about the points raised about traffic calming. I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. I live on one of I know where I live in one of
The mayor actually has the worst actual section of the worst street right in front of her
I
house.
back out of my driveway at my own peril. But so I appreciate and recognize what it takes to move some of these efforts forward, and definitely appreciate everyone for coming out and organizing within your communities to try to get some of these issues solved. And also I appreciate the point raised about what we're doing in terms of our pilots. I will say that we have been, this council and other councils have been working for a very long time to think through ways in which we can address incentivizing and moving forward housing development within our city. We've talked about this at length when we were doing our housing and economic development strategic plan, which was listed as a recommendation there. We also have been working for quite some time with our staff on trying to think through ways to address things such as pilots. So I think we're ready. I think we're ready right now to start taking on this challenge. I want to remind folks that our staff has been working diligently. So on Tuesday, September the 24th, is the Housing Strategic Plan Implementation Forum. I've heard that there's a desire for there to be more engagement, and we were very adamant about making sure that we're able to not only engage our residents, but educate our residents on what we need as a community in order to build housing, much needed housing that so many people in our community desperately need. So I will say I am not for tabling these discussions. All of us have had lots of experience resilience as it relates to the MMPA. There's tons of data regarding housing and the approach to housing that we've been proposing that's available online. And we look forward to having these conversations, especially as we try to finalize some decisions regarding some of our pilot programs that may help us to actually move forward with building housing in Tacoma Park. And so with that, I'm going to turn things over to our city manager for comments.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council and guests. And just want to lead with asking you to please pardon my necessary absence last week due to illness, and I'm feeling much better now. Housing and community development. The city has been awarded a $220,000 grant from the Department of Transportation's Safe Streets and Roads for All program. This will fund the development of a comprehensive safety action plan for the city, including 2 demonstration projects, hardening of left turns on New Hampshire Avenue, and implementing a mid-block crosswalk at a bus stop on East-West Highway, in order to reduce and eliminate vehicular crashes resulting in serious injury or death. Once the safety action plan is complete, we will become eligible to apply for implementation funding from the same program. The Department of Transportation's Safe Streets and Roads for All program funded 354 local, regional, and tribal communities to improve roadway safety and prevent deaths and serious injuries on America's rural and urban roads. The city at Tacoma Park will offer 3 Learn to Ride classes in September, taught by the Washington Area Bicycle Association. These classes will guide students through a 3-step process: gliding, pedaling, and riding. They are designed for children aged 6 to 13 who have either never ridden a bike before or who have struggled to learn. The goal is for students to be able to ride with 2 pedals by the end of the session. Due to high demand in the age range of ages 6 through 8, the originally planned 11 through 13-year-old class has been converted into a second class for 6 to 8-year-olds. The strong interest and positive feedback from parents underscore the value of such programs in enhancing the quality of life for all city residents. This program is made possible through the work of the Housing and Community Development and the Recreation Departments. The city has a new process regarding resident input for traffic calming and sidewalk requests. At the direction of council, staff developed 2 revised administrative regulations which took effect on July 1st. The regulations make it easier for residents to make requests through a simple online form rather than a former petition process. The review process includes an evaluation tool and community engagement. And projects are then included in the council budget process where funds are allocated for projects. Projects that are submitted before December 31st will be considered for the fiscal year 26 budget. As specified in the regulations, a Tacoma Park resident may submit a request for a new sidewalk facility or a new traffic calming device located within 1/4 mile from their primary residence. The request form and the full administrative regulations are available on the city's website, tacomaparkmd.gov. If you drop traffic calming into the search, the page will display in the options. On Thursday, September 19th at 2 p.m., there's a ribbon cutting at Montgomery College for the Catherine and Isaiah Leggett Math and Science Building, as mentioned by the mayor. From the police department, September is National Suicide Prevention Month. In times of darkness, it's important to remember that you are not alone. Every life is valuable, and together as a community, we can be the light for those who feel lost. Reach out, talk, and listen, because sometimes a simple conversation can save a life. The 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is there for you. If you or someone you know is struggling or needs support, please call or text 988 to be connected to a local crisis center. You are not alone. From the Recreation Department. The Recreation Department office at the Community Center will shut down next week, September 16th through the 20th, so that remaining staff can relocate to the temporary library location. The Recreation Department office will remain at the temporary library location during the duration of the renovations to the community center. Please allow additional time for staff to return emails and calls while they are relocating and establishing their new office area. We appreciate everybody's patience as we work through this process. And finally, from the city manager's office, a staff shout out from the police department. We are pleased to share that Sergeant Eldaffel recently participated in the Tour de Force 9/11 Memorial Ride. The Tour de Force was started in 2002 after New York Police Department Detective Robert DePaulis decided to ride his bike in honor of the fallen police officers who gave their lives in the September 11th, 2001 attack. The Tour de Force has evolved into a 4-day, 280-mile ride in which 300 law enforcement officers from across the U.S. and abroad, along with some family and friends, participate to raise funds for the families of law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty. Each participant, support team member, and staff raise funds and put in a lot of work through the year to make sure this event is a huge success. In Sergeant DeFaffel's own words, quote, "The tour was amazing, but more importantly, the amount raised from this year's tour was phenomenal. Rough total is over $528,000. To raise funds for the families of law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty. Our Tacoma Park Police Department fund was able to raise and contribute $2,520 with just one team member, which was amazing," he said, "for my first time on the tour." Sergeant DeFaffel rode 64 miles a day on average for 4 days. The most he rode in one day was 76.5 miles. More than the miles is the purpose for which Sergeant DeFaffel rode to honor our nation's fallen officers that demonstrates his zeal, dedication, and commitment to the profession of our agency, the city, and each of you. And that concludes my report this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, with that, we are going to move to our presentation for this evening. Tonight we'll have a presentation on the Low Impact Development Center, LIDC, Stormwater Resiliency Study.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having us. My name is David Miller. I'm the Director of Engineering at the Low Impact Development Center. Looks like we're having a couple of technical difficulties. I'm not sure if the other folks from my office are going to make it on. Neil won't be here, but Greg may be able to pop on in a minute. So thanks again for having us, and big thanks to Daryl and the staff at the Department of Public Works who we've been working very closely with during this project.
Hey, David, before you get started, are you planning to do the PowerPoint remotely, or did you want me to advance it through the...
Whatever works for you. I don't know if it's more difficult for me to try to share screen.
Okay, and then you can just tell me when to advance.
All right, sounds great. Let's go ahead and just jump to the next slide.
Yeah, and let's get give them a minute here to catch up with us. Oops.
Sure.
I also wanted to just briefly introduce a topic near and dear to David Miller and I. We've been working on it for quite some time. But I just wanted to remind the public and the council that the city contracted with the Low Impact Development Center in fiscal year 22. So we've been working on this for quite some time. At that point, the council provided $150,000 in the operating budget for such a study to be performed. The city identified the Low Impact Development Center based on their record of very impactful, successful work with a number of our sister jurisdictions. We heard great things about
got them through Hyattsville, Somerset, and Cheverly. They had a contract through Prince George's County, so the city was able to ride on that contract to bring them in and present the study. The scope of the work was 4 specific tasks. For any interested in following more detailed, all the information on the resiliency study, the tasks and the deliverables, as well as videos of all the community meetings that we held, are available and linked on the city's stormwater resiliency page of the city website. So I would encourage anyone who wants more information to visit that site. The first task was to provide a suite of stormwater management solutions for both private and public property to provide much needed public information. That is available and accessible on our website. The second task were them to review 20 locations that were identified from historic information on the part of city staff where we had reports of flooding or previously known flooding incidents. And so they used GIS information, satellite imagery, and field visits to evaluate these locations, and then developed some statements and recommendations about next steps and possible remediation measures. They also were going to initially take a subset of 2 of those sites and develop a more thorough and complete, or not complete, but a more thorough analysis about the impacts and potential solutions. In working with David and Greg and Neil, they identified an area of the city that they found to be most sensitive to flooding. And so instead of 2 sites, they actually created a menu of 10 different locations for the city to consider additional improvements. They also were going to look at proposed incentives and code changes that the city might want to consider. And lastly, we established a dashboard on the city's website that enables property owners to estimate the amount of runoff produced by various types of storms based on the actual location, topography, and impervious nature of individual property, so people can pull up their individual property and evaluate that. The software tool gives you a couple of different features and information. Residents are also able to request a remote session with stormwater professionals to discuss potential measures for reducing runoff on their property. So we definitely would like to encourage anyone who has not been on the site and would be interested to link on to Rain Plan, take a look at their property, and then request the remote session if that might be of interest to them. So tonight's presentation is basically for LIDC to provide a summary of all the work that they've done with the city, primarily over 2023, the numerous site visits. We had 4 different community meetings, and again, as I mentioned, all that information is on the website. So with that, David, I think that's a summary, and we'll just jump right in, and you can just cue me when you want me to forward the slide.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. If you don't mind going back just one. And I'll try to be brief. I know it's late, and I think if it's possible, if we can do questions at the end, it'll probably work best, if that's okay with the council. So today we'll just go through a little bit of the study background. Daryl did a great summary, so I won't go on about that too long. We'll talk about the resident assistance information, summary of the study goals and focus. We'll discuss how the study areas were put together, the proposed projects, the code assessment, and then we'll have our questions and answers. So a little bit of background. The project was, as you just heard, to assess study areas that were compiled by city staff through outreach efforts. So there was a large effort with the city, problems that they knew about, and reaching out to the public to help develop those areas. And then for us, we wanted to develop an understanding of the key resiliency issues for the city. So throughout the city, stormwater resiliency was our focus, seeing areas where we could help provide support for the stormwater management system. And you heard about the dashboard for the city residents with Rain Plan. We're not going to go into that today, but I also highly recommend anyone who's having stormwater issues or wants to learn more, that's a great place to go. They have connections to funding. They have all kinds of really good information. And then we also, at the end, performed a detailed study and we modeled smaller areas to help identify future projects, and we'll talk a little bit about a couple of those tonight. So this is a great little drawing from MDE, and it's called Everything You Need to Know About Climate Change and Stormwater in 5 Minutes. And the basic information you're looking at here, on the right side of your screen, you see that little red line, and that's the 24-hour storm. So the idea is, over a day, how much rain are you going to get? And a lot of our systems that we've been building over the last 100+ years are based on this 24-hour storm. As we've all seen and experienced with climate change, we're getting a lot more of what we would call cloudburst events, and those are events that have more rainfall in a shorter duration. So it's what we would call higher intensity. That would be the green storm on the left. That would, in this case, is a 2-hour storm. So this water fell within 2 hours. And you can see, if you look at the bottom right, twice as much peak discharge, or the amount of water you might see in the street or running into the storm drain, is occurring. And so a lot of our cities all around the area are facing challenges of how do we deal with these emerging different storms, higher intensities. And so that's something that we were able to focus on in this study. So the key issues, of course, with stormwater, always life and safety. So anything you're doing, those are the first two things you look at. Other things, you may have heard of a floodplain, and that's an area that's been shown to potentially experience flooding in larger storm events. And also to realize that not all flooding is in that area. So yes, this might be what we call like the 100-year floodplain. However, that doesn't mean we don't have flooding and nuisance flooding and other issues in other areas. How can we prevent property damage, both public and private? And then how do we prioritize or help the city prioritize capital improvements and what resources are needed to do the most good for the least cost? And then we also have what can private property owners do resources. So we have the guidance documents we'll show in a moment, and then the rain plan dashboard that has some links to assistance programs. And just very quickly, because we tend to get a lot of questions about this, what data sources were we using? So we have different GIS tree surveys. The Department of Public Works has some excellent storm drain mapping, so that was really helpful for this project. Hearing drainage complaints was a really big data source for us. Hearing from the public what's actually going on the ground, which can sometimes tell a better picture than some of the things that we have access to. Environmental justice, our desktop analysis where we're using aerial and satellite imagery. And we'll talk more about our field analysis, and of course, for the storms, some weather data. So here's just one page of the resident assistance document, just to give you an idea. And so this document has a few things in it. One, an explanation of some common problems. So here we're talking about flooding that might happen where water's going towards your house or maybe into your basement, and some ways that residents can help themselves and their neighbors avoid these issues. So here's a example, pushing the downspouts away from the foundation, giving the water a way to get out of your yard and towards the public right-of-way where the public storm drain system can kind of take over. And so while these might not be specific to a single person, they offer some pretty good general guidance and help in understanding some of the challenges that homeowners may be facing. All right, so now we're getting into the study. So the study goals for us and the focus of our study were to assess the 20 study areas that were compiled by the city staff through outreach efforts. We wanted to provide recommendations and assistance for each of the 20 areas, and Greg is going to be talking in just a moment about how we did that. I just want everyone to keep in mind those 20 areas were kind of the higher level recommendations, not specific projects or exact specific owner by owner, private property by private property recommendations, but maybe a little bit more general for the area. And then we did do a detailed study of a smaller area. That area included 4 of our 20 study areas, and that was to identify the potential projects. So we did some stormwater modeling, and we did a lot more in-depth analysis in those areas. And go ahead, Greg, please.
Thanks, David. Great. So here's a map of the original 20 areas using the information that was given to us at LID Center by Tacoma Park DPW. As you can see, they're fairly distributed throughout Tacoma Park, with some clusters around some of the streams and creek areas. So LID Center visited each one of these 20 sites. We conducted a field investigation with the help of Tacoma Park DPW. We were also joined by affected and interested residents in these areas. And during these site visits, we really just did a lot of listening, a lot of note taking, took a lot of pictures, and really just tried to observe the drainage patterns in the area. And although it was not raining at the time, we were really able to get a good idea of what was going on, what properties were actually being affected, and what storm drain infrastructures might have been creating some of these drainage problems. And from that, we were really able to refine down these study areas to get a better idea of where exactly these flooding issues were. So if you go to the next slide, David. So as you can see, just go back one if you could. There we go. So some of these areas changed a little bit. As you can see, the main thing is that a lot of them got a lot smaller. So at first, we kind of had the big picture between this block and this approximate area. But then after our field investigation and specific discussions, we could really narrow it down to 1 or 2 properties, or maybe a specific storm drain inlet that was having problems. So we were really able to pinpoint exactly where the issues were, refine those original areas, and figure out what exactly was going on. So for each one of these 20 areas, what we did is we documented everything that we observed, everything that we were told by Tacoma Park Department of Public Works and residents, and we turned that into a map that basically showed all of those flooding problems. Go to the next slide. So here's an example for one of the 20 areas. This is area 14. This is near the intersection of Elm Avenue and Prince George's Avenue. So I know there's a lot on this map, but just to give a high-level overview, we have the study area demarcated in dashed blue lines. We have some of the flow patterns, the drainage patterns, marked out with flow arrows to show where the water is flowing on the site. And then notes from various residents who have firsthand experience, who have witnessed the flooding, and then Tacoma Park officials as well, who also have inside knowledge of what is actually going on. And then, of course, some of our observations when we were there as well. And the purpose of this was really to get to the source of where the flooding issues are. Is this coming from the street? Is this coming from, uphill private properties? Not to go over every single one of these notes, but a few things here. You can see we marked a few points of concern with some stars. One of them being that there is a small stream running behind some of these private properties. This is a somewhat common thing in Tacoma Park, as there's a lot of small streams running behind houses. In this case, this stream enters the public storm drain system actually on private property. So this is a little bit of a complex one here, but as this stream enters the public storm drain system, there's a little bit of a choke point that we believe could be leading to some overland flow. And those 2 properties on the north side of Elm Avenue have reported significant flooding in that area. So we saw that this is probably an area where the stream enters the storm drain system where this could be creating flooding. Another thing to note was at the low point of Elm Avenue where we have that star, there's a couple inlets, but we noticed there's a large amount of runoff that appears to be coming to this area, and those inlets might be getting overtopped in certain instances. And this was confirmed from reports from residents on the south side of Elm Avenue who said that occasionally during large storm events, these inlets will overflow and some of the runoff can go onto their property. Next slide, David. So then after we documented all of this, we began our assessment. Screen looks a little blurry to me. I'm not sure if that's just mine, but there we go. We were able to give some recommendations that could help alleviate flooding in this area. In this case, there were a few things that Tacoma Park DPW could consider doing to alleviate flooding. One of them would be to install a standard storm structure head wall at the entrance to the small stream on private property. This might require some collaboration with private homeowners. Additionally, installing some inlets uphill on Elm Avenue on the west side, or just enlarging the inlets at the bottom of Elm Avenue may increase capacity to get runoff off of the road and prevent any flow onto other private properties. I believe that's it for this, David.
And just also to add to that, for the 20 study areas where we did the higher level and for the projects I'm about to speak about, our analysis didn't go into the depth of doing a computation to say, you know, the head wall needs to be this big or the pipe needs to be this much larger. Those types of things would require specific projects and design projects for each instance. This is more of a general kind of what we might call a nick point, like, hey, this is looking like it's causing the problem. It may be undersized. It warrants further investigation. So you can see here, this is our model study area. So it's kind of bordered by Carroll Avenue, and then it goes down into, I think it's called Tacoma Branch, the Sligo Creek tributary. And some of the runoff is actually coming from Washington, D.C. So that's another thing that the city has to deal with, is there is runoff coming from another district that enters the Tacoma Park system and may contribute to higher flows. Next slide, please. So in the course of this project, we did this detailed model. We looked at what areas may have pipes that are too small, what areas have capacity issues. One of the things we actually found, which is interesting, is that a lot of the pipes have capacity, but it's possible that the inlets don't, and I'll get to that in a minute. But through all of this, working very closely with the Department of Public Works, we came up with this list of 10 potential projects that the city may want to consider that'll have a good bang for their buck, so to speak. So we see here, there's the scope of the project, the flood control benefit, and the water quality benefit. These are estimations. One of the things, some of these have water quality benefits, which can potentially go towards the city's NPDES requirements, which is those water quality requirements. And at the LID Center, one of the things that we really try to emphasize is anywhere we can handle water quantity or gray infrastructure and combine that with water quality, which is green infrastructure, it's really says to us it's a good project. And along with that, there can be potential funding sources for both tracks. So there's quantity and there are quality funding sources. And sometimes if you have a project that does both, that can be a great thing. And just to briefly go through them, we don't have time to speak about every project in depth, but there's an area in Circle Woods that we had a project, Circle Avenue and Poplar Avenue, Lake Street, 2nd Avenue, Columbia and Poplar, the VFW parking lot area, Orchard Avenue, Estrelitas, Montessori, Hickory Avenue, and then one of these was a citywide recommendation. And also you'll see there's a priority and time frame that have been left blank. That's really a city's decision. We have some projects that we thought were interesting and that could provide benefit. And from here, the city can take some of that information and prioritize. As well, these costs are very rough. It's really based on our experience and based on similar projects we've seen recently. We think these could be a range for cost, but we don't have any geotechnical information. We don't have the kind of information you would need to have a very exact cost estimate. So I would expect these in reality to range a bit widely. Next slide, please. And so I just want to talk through two of the projects. Number one, and many people might be familiar with the area of Circle Woods. There's a stream that goes through here. There are several outfalls. You can see one of them on Lake Street here that feed this stream. And then during certain storm events, larger, more flashy storm events, we have a little bit of overflowing. I've heard that the water can go over through this grassy area above the pipe across Circle Avenue. It's impacting private residences in a negative way. And so there are two things here that we think could make a great project. One would be a pipe or culvert replacement. There's a big pipe in there that may be undersized. Again, with our modeling, we noticed that it may be undersized. It would require additional investigation from an engineering design. And then there are WSSC lots, and I believe the city has either talked or may consider talking to WSSC about using these lots for some type of BMP. And so what would happen is during a large storm event, when the water gets high, you divert some of that water into this area. You treat water quality, so we're treating nitrogen, phosphorus, trash, sediment, turbidity, all of these things that we're worried about. At the same time, we're taking a bit of that water offline. And I like to say we're kind of cutting the top. If you can remember that drawing we showed earlier with that high peak flow, sometimes if you can just cut the top off and reduce that peak a little bit, you can have a huge benefit in terms of flooding. And so the combination of these two potential fixes may together provide a very large benefit. And then we can go ahead and go to the next slide. And then project number 10, this was our citywide recommendation. And just to explain this a little bit, one of the things we look at in our evaluation is a future storm, and that was a 25% increase in the intensity. This is used fairly widely when people are approximating what future storms may look like. Some of you may have heard of something called the A storm that's coming out soon. I believe that's showing like a 13 to 15% increase in intensity. That may be the new standard that we'll be designing to. For now, it's just that old 10-year, 24-hour storm. But when we looked at this intensity, even with the higher intensity, a lot of the pipes in the city actually do have capacity. And we heard from Public Works, there's been a lot of money and time and energy spent increasing the capacity of the storm drain system to meet future needs. And it looks like from the model that a lot of that work has been very effective. But at the same time, we're getting reports from residents and from the Department of Public Works. We have flooding here, we have water bypassing inlets. And so when you look at design standards, especially a long time ago, the inlets were often designed for the 2-year storm, and then the pipes are designed for the 10-year storm. The inlets may have been designed to be in sag, but then through years of development and resurfacing streets, that condition might not exist anymore. And so sometimes a lower expense, higher impact fix can just be to increase the length or the size of the inlets. And so one of our big recommendations for the city, something that may be impactful in the shorter term, whereas some of these projects are longer term, could just be increasing the length and size of the inlets to help deal with some of that surface flow, while some of these other projects may be in the works. And next slide. The last part of our project was a code assessment. And this was looking at the county and particularly the city stormwater code just for some areas that might consider changing or tweaking to help the city and to help the residents. And we came up with 2 ideas that we think might be impactful. One is to reevaluate the groundwater recharge requirements for stormwater management permits within the city. Groundwater recharge is when you make sure that water is re-entering the groundwater table. The reason you do this is because we often put in roads and impervious surfaces. Water will run off those, it'll end up in streams, and then you may have impacts to the groundwater. Places like California see this. You hear maybe about the aquifers being really, really low, and so groundwater recharge can be extremely important. In areas like the city of Tacoma Park, especially lower lying areas near streams and rivers, we're actually seeing a lot of high groundwater issues. We went to some areas where people might call a natural spring, where water is coming out of the groundwater table onto the surface. This can cause intrusion into basements, it can cause wet yards, and a bunch of other problems. So in areas especially like this, it might be worthwhile not to try to increase the amount of groundwater recharge and rather allow that water to be taken through the storm drain system and out to the river. The second piece, and I want to be very clear that in this recommendation and Public Works are very mindful of not, one, burdening the citizens with red tape and reviews, and 2, not burdening Public Works with a workload that would be too high, is just to offer like a mini review or a helpful helping hand for very small projects. This might be an addition on a house, someone regrading their yard. It's not going to reach the 5,000 square foot or these other levels that you might need a stormwater permit. And that's kind of like a pretty general county to county regulation, city to city regulation. But sometimes what will happen is, and everyone, just doing the best they can, they'll put in an addition, they'll regrade their yard, and then we'll find out months later, oh, the way that this was put in is causing groundwater intrusion issues. Maybe it's causing water to flow differently. It could impact a downhill neighbor. It could, over time, when this happens along a street, impact the flow patterns of the entire neighborhood. And so having some type of mini review or some type of assistance so that the residents can avoid some of these problems might help individual private property owners. And go ahead to the next slide. So that's our overview. Tried not to take too much of your time, and happy to take any questions you might have about the project or about the results.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I know I see so many lights. My colleagues are super excited to discuss this project. And you probably have seen many of them on the site visits and the various meetings. So everyone has been looking forward to this presentation. So Councilmember DeBala.
Yes, thank you. I have questions about there you are. 2 different things. So I'll group them. And the first set of questions is about the 10 project recommendations. And the second set is about the policy, the code recommendations. And if any of this gets too detailed and we need to take this offline because we have other things to do tonight, somebody just let me know. So on the 10 projects, I noticed, pardon?
Did I go back to the list or?
Page 14.
Yeah, well, there's no map, but if there was a map, it would show that most of them are in one part of the city. Almost all of them are. And so my question is whether that's one of geography or of what's already been done, because the city has done a lot of work in a couple of neighborhoods recently. So that's one question. Along with that, the example you gave in detail on Elm Avenue, I actually don't see a proposed, you talked about solutions, but I don't see them on the proposed project list. So this must somehow have been ranked or consolidated and not everything made the list. So I'd be interested in how that happened.
Can we answer first before you get too far?
Well, okay, I'll stop. All right, I only have one more on that part.
Yeah, so thank you, council member. It's good to see you again.
Yeah.
We enjoyed
Thanks for all the work.
walking out there. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So my apologies. I probably did not explain this very clearly. So the Elm Avenue, that first map that Greg went through, that was one of our 20 sites.
Right.
So for every single one of those sites, we gave general recommendations. And so Greg talked through how some of those recommendations are pretty specific. Maybe we adjust the head wall, maybe we need to update these inlets. Those are scattered throughout the city, and that was based on drainage complaints and needs and a process that the Public Works Department, and Daryl can maybe speak more about that, went through, and they're pretty well distributed across different areas of the city that are experiencing some kind of flooding. The list of 10 projects is a direct result of our modeling effort. And we were originally supposed to pick 2 of the 20 areas. We did 4 of them because we found that they were hydraulically connected. And so we went through a process with the Public Works Department of trying to say, we can only do one model with the budget that we have and the time we have. And we can only be a certain area. Which area seems to have the greatest number of issues that have been reported, and where can we, with this kind of pilot model, do the most good or have the greatest impact for what we're doing? And so out of that modeling effort, we came up with 10 potential projects just in this area. But we do have recommendations for every single one of the 20 areas that are spread throughout the entire city of Tacoma.
Okay, so your intent is, if I got this right, your intent is not to say that this is the most important or the most, comes first, this is the area that got modeled, is what you're saying. And that
Right.
in the other 20, out of the 20 sites.
Yeah, I would
all
put
of
a-
those other recommendations are still things that you all would recommend be done.
Yeah.
And
I would add an overlay to that, which is particularly with their modeling, this area of the city has the largest amount of capacity issues. When you run the rain evaluations through the system, this is the part of the city where you're going to see failures. And so that's why we focused on this area. We knew it instinctively, and the data and the evaluation and the analysis proved that out.
Great.
It doesn't mean that we don't have issues all around the city, as we did identify those 20 sites. But when you look at the hydrology and the pipe age and capacity issues, we're finding this is the area where we're going to have, 10 years from now, where we're going to have more and more overland flow issues related to our stormwater system.
And so jumping ahead, when you are doing your capital budget planning, then you're not necessarily going to be saying we should do the modeling in other areas. You're going to say citywide, this is what we've got, and then work on how that's all going to lay out. Okay.
Yeah, and the council can determine how they'd like to hear this. Based on the information that we got from LIDC, we've been internally evaluating and working on sort of how to fit that in. As you may all know, we do sort of a 5-year plan in our capital budget for stormwater. We kind of removed all our projects from the list other than FY25 because in light of knowing that this stormwater resiliency study was going, those list of projects that we'd already had in mind didn't go anywhere. They're still on our Excel spreadsheet. But what we're trying to do is weave those projects that were identified through LIDC as well as the known projects where we have, and those could be anything from pipe failures that we know are an issue to capacity issues to some very innovative and really exciting projects that LIDC has presented. So what we're hoping to do is continue with that 5-year goal of identifying where we're going to plug in those LIDC projects. First, the ones that came from the 20 sites that have city responsibility, and second, the ones that came from those 10 sites that were had a little more in-depth focus.
And
So
we're-
you'll see those. We'll be able to present to you what our plan is. And we're staying within the existing our stormwater budget. So we have a $750,000 budget each year. About $500,000 to $600,000 goes towards repairs and capital budgets. So capital projects. So we're keeping within that capacity. I think many of these projects, and David Gregg could probably speak to this, are potential projects that if we get them designed, we could potentially seek grants for that. But it is a bit of a chicken and egg problem. So we could, like we did with Tacoma Branch, had a fully blown design for 5 or 6 years that we could never get funded. But you go through the process of developing the design. So there's a lot of investment dollars in the engineering analysis of that. And you do run some risks, as we learned with Tacoma Branch and Brashears Run. When you designed things 5 years ago, the ground reality may shift and you don't know that. And so you're going to have some unknown conditions.
Okay, so all of that was leading to what is the next step, and the next step is to put this out in a 5-year plan. Personally, I would be interested in 2 options, because I think the $750 a year isn't going to go very far. So I would be interested in a second capital planning option that looks at if we either through grants or through increased stormwater fees or magic. No, seriously, what it would look like if we put more into it. How much more we could address, because this isn't going to get any, we all know this isn't going to go away, this problem.
It's not going anywhere. Yeah, one of the challenges, of course, is money into the infrastructure isn't the only issue. It's also staff capacity.
Yes.
So when we know that we can barely do now what we have planned in our annual work plan with our staff availability. So to add more projects, without a doubt, means adding more staff, either consulting engineering staff or actually on the payroll staff.
Okay, so do you want to continue with the project?
I will just kind of say that there's many questions here. It has a lot of good information and raises a lot of questions. I guess one question that's David, you more than alluded, you referred to having to do with the water coming from Washington, D.C. We also have water coming from Montgomery County, from Montgomery College, et cetera. To what degree is getting more information on the amount of water coming from DC and other places important for us to know how to proceed, and what kind, and I guess a question would be for Daryl in terms of our how well can we work with other jurisdictions in terms of finding out, all the water doesn't just emerge from here, it comes from other places. So David, could you confirm or at least speak to the value or the importance of knowing how much water is coming from outside the Tacoma Park, specifically DC?
Absolutely, that's a great question. Sometimes it's a difficult question because you don't always know exactly what's going on over there, right? One of the things we did in this study, and you can probably kind of see in this image, was we, in a conservative way, and conservative meaning if we had a question, we left it in, so we could evaluate the maximum potential impact, included water that was coming from DC. So that way, when we're analyzing downstream culverts and pipes and big structures, we were able to say, is the capacity adequate if all the water from DC that we think might get there makes it, right? And so that was very important, especially analyzing the area that goes into Tacoma Branch and those very large, I think they're like 12 by 4 concrete boxes that empty into Tacoma Branch. As far as working with DC, I think I would leave that to Director Braithwaite. But we did analyze that. I didn't have really good pipe information for DC. That was kind of outside of the scope of this investigation. But as far as how the model works, we ran a couple of different scenarios, is what I'll call them, and making sure that we would run the model in a way that would show if all the water from DC got into your pipe, what would happen, what would be the result. And so that is captured in the model and in our discussions with Public Works and in the way that we approach the project.
So David, just to follow up, so like Brashears Run and then Tacoma Branch, you made certain assumptions about how much water was coming from those two areas, which, is that correct?
Correct. And just, folks that may or may not be as familiar with this type of modeling, you have to make a lot of assumptions. Really, the data that Tacoma Park Public Works has is some of the best data that I've actually seen doing this work compared with other municipalities we've worked with. So the number of assumptions you have to make here are actually less than I have normally encountered. But you do have to make a lot of assumptions. We're dealing with GIS information, aerial information. You're not dealing with a full survey, foot by foot with a crew of an area this large. It's just not feasible. It would cost you $1 million to do it, right? So what we do is we take the best information available, we make assumptions that are in line with industry standards and that align with field observations, and then we run the model. And then what we do sometimes is we say, well, what if that assumption was wrong? Let's try this other assumption. Does it make a big difference? And you run the model again. And through that process, you can kind of determine what assumptions you've made, how correct are they, how impactful are they. So yes, we did make some assumptions. We erred on the side of, let's assume more water is getting to Tacoma Park rather than less, so that we could really evaluate, I won't call it worst case scenario, but what's the full impact of water coming into the system from other areas and water coming into the system from the city.
Yeah, and I just want to add briefly that we're the recipients of it now. So we're living it every day, every storm. So the water from DC, it doesn't really matter if we know what part and what is. It's here. it comes into Tacoma Branch. So we're handling that water. We can't have a spigot on Eastern Avenue and say, okay, we're closed, DC Water, you got to go somewhere else. So we're managing it now. We know, we're living the experience now, and of course, we'll all be affected with increased rainfall. The other thing I do want to point out, there's a bright spot here, which is that, we haven't had good luck working with DC Water or DC DDOT in terms of stormwater infrastructure, stormwater repairs. It takes a lot of work to get them to respond to our calls, answer questions, do repairs. That said, we do know that DDOT has got a major project planned on Eastern Avenue, which includes vast amounts of stormwater and green infrastructure. So there is a project out there on the horizon in FY26. We should do everything we can do to encourage our DC friends to fund it. It's been designed, it's fully vetted, it's ready to go, and it will be a huge impact on our border. And it will affect stormwater because it's going to provide additional stormwater capacity. Currently, the inlets on Eastern Avenue, we clean. They're DC inlets, but if we didn't clean them, there would be flooding, and it would flood Tacoma Park residents. So, we take that step because we have to at this point. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. There is going to be a major infrastructure project done.
Thank you. Yeah, I was also thinking that maybe there's some COG funds for those, multi-jurisdictional stuff.
Sorry, everybody, but we need to keep moving. We are at 9:21 PM. Councilmember Fulcher.
Thank you. So I'm hearing that a lot of this study had to do with capacity issues, and so we're looking at like the pipes that are taking stuff away. In my ward, we have that sort of area where everything comes together, two hills kind of come together along Cedar Avenue, where a giant tree fell onto a house April 4th. So my question is, do studies like this indicate anything that we're going to be able to do about areas like that? Are our tree policies keeping up with trees that are falling in between areas like this? That, it might not be the safest thing for a 3-story tree to be sitting in an area like that. And so just kind of wondering where we as a city are on policies and being able to help areas like that.
I would say we probably should have Marty in the room for this conversation, our urban forest manager. That being said, the large trees have been here for 100 years, 80 years, so they've picked their spot and they've grown. Of course, climate has changed around them. We've all lived through the ambrosia beetle, which was a first ever in anybody's memory here, where we lost hundreds and hundreds of oaks as a result of the ambrosia beetle. I think we can anticipate more of that, not that you can plan for something like that, but climate change is going to bring out different vectors, different diseases, different issues with water tables, and something that grew 80 years ago may not be able to adapt. So,
is there anything we can do for stormwater management when it comes to something like a private property like that? Because it seems like the capacity issue isn't necessarily, like the water is being absorbed into the ground right there. And so is it a stormwater management issue of pipes and such like that?
I don't think so. That was a historic stream. Basically there was a stream, down what's now Philadelphia Avenue, where houses are now built. So the ground got filled in some places pipes got put in. So you have, water goes where water always went, from the creation of time. So I don't know that it's a per se stormwater issue as much as a climate change issue.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulcher. Councilmember Small.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I have a 30,000-foot question that intersects with this, and it's ironically 30,000 feet because it has to do with the rain. I think this question is for Greg. Given the changes in the way that the climate is and the nexus between the climate and the stormwater, how far away are we from becoming designated as a tropical area, for example, as opposed to whatever we are now? Because this spring in particular, at least over where we live, it was like living in an actual rainforest because everything was green. There were new plants growing that like didn't get enough water before. And I'm just curious about if you guys know where we are in the timeline or of approach of actual changes, like structural, like durable weather changes.
Yeah, Greg, I'll take this one.
Either one of you. I just thought that my bad.
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I believe I heard recently this was the hottest summer on record in our area ever, and they expect that to happen more. As far as designating us a tropical zone, or I think that has something to do more with like latitude than climate. I'm not really up on that. But what I can say as far as are these changes permanent? Where are we? The governing bodies that talk about these storms and the intensity and how we design and how we plan and how we manage them are in the process of coming out with a new storm, basically. And when I say new storm, it's like a new standard, which means, hey, there's new reality.
Because it's too hard to, like, the years and all that other stuff is just too complicated. I appreciate that. I can't wait.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councilmember Small. Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. Just real quickly, you mentioned to Councilmember Honzak that there were no priorities on these projects, but yet we just heard about 5 of them tonight, and there's 20 projects identified on here, so there's some kind of priority used for that. And I just want to make sure, I think Project 5 is the one that's located in Ward 4.
The numbers don't have a priority associated with it. Are you talking about this
I didn't
list?
think that, but I just wanted to say that there's, I think, 4 and 5 are both in Ward 4. And I just want to make sure that as we...
On this list or?
On the map, on the map.
On the map?
It doesn't matter. My point is, I just want to ensure that the Ward 4 residents have equal opportunity for seeking and getting grants to meet the needs in those particular project areas.
Thank you.
That's not really a question, is it?
No, we're done. I'm sorry. We got to move on. But I do want to piggyback off of Councilmember Siemens' practical question because I'm a practical thinker as well. I know that we had talked about when we were discussing budget priorities about the possibility of making sure that we were able to allocate additional resources for implementation of a couple of these. Now, whether or not that's something that would come out of the stormwater budget as part of the CIP, or whether or not when we are having conversations about the upcoming budget, and I see Rob, whenever he does that, that means you have no money. What are you talking about? But I do think that, you know, it would be helpful now that we have the report, which we didn't have before, now that we have more information, to at least be a little better equipped with being able to say definitively, how do we want to do these? How do we want to prioritize? You know, is it dealing with the wrath of residents if we're raising the stormwater fee, or is it, you know, what is it that we may want to, the pros and the cons in terms of trying to identify the resources necessary to move some of these things forward. I think some of the bigger ticket items really are ripe for grant monies that may be available, but I think that there are some smaller items fall a little bit more squarely within our purview as a city. I am really focused on this inlet upgrades thing. I don't quite know how many inlets we need to upgrade, but I could see that this is something that could be implemented and managed over time in a way that, given the per inlet estimate, may not be a budget buster for us, especially because we're going into the 26 budget, which everyone is forecasting to be a difficult
I know
one.
we're short on time, but I want to assure the council that we've already been doing that for the past 10 years. So when we have a road project and we come across an inlet that we know is undersized, and it's real obvious when you see them, they're 2 feet deep. 18 inches wide. We replaced the inlet as part of our process. So we're already, doing that as we do infrastructure projects, not specifically stormwater, but if we're doing a sidewalk project, a roadway project, or stormwater projects. So we have been actively upgrading and enlarging, and in some cases, you'll find us car train together. We're backing inlets to inlets to inlets to provide capacity and storage as well as, stormwater management. So, yeah. There's plenty more to do, but we have been doing
We
that
have been
as a
doing that
routine.
in a gradual way.
Yep.
Okay, excellent.
Director Braithwaite, can you also just share briefly, you have a concept for how you want to prioritize some of these projects in FY26 and beyond? If you could
Yeah.
just touch on that briefly.
Yeah, sure. We've already identified in this current FY25 budget, there's one or two LIDC projects that are already planned for this year. Actually, more than that. We've got the big project on Garland and Davis, which was one of the ones that was evaluated with the 20 sites. There's also the second phase of the Poplar Avenue project, which has been one that we worked on a few years ago. That is one specifically where we'll be elevating driveways, elevating sidewalks, and expanding undersized inlets. And then we have some system repairs on Holly Avenue. An inlet wall needs to be rebuilt. There's a tree growing in our stormwater trench. And on Kennebec, one of the recommendations was to elevate a driveway that has water, when the water flows from Erie to Flower and down Kennebec, it's coming back up a driveway and into private property. Again, our priority of when we identify those, that's a high priority to do. So we elevate the driveway to keep the water on the road and off of private property. So we've got a handful of projects that we'll be doing. There's a couple of so many different factors. One is that is it designed or complicated, and how many steps does it take to develop a design? If it's one we can do in-house, it's a lot easier to do and put into a schedule. If it's one that we know is going to require significant engineering support, we kind of have to plan for that. We also have to balance this need for our NPDES permit and creating treatment credits, as well as our infrastructure, just, repairing broken pipes and inlets, absolutely essential. So we've got multiple priorities that we have to make sure we've got a foot in each one. We've got to fix the broken pipes, we've got to get our treatment credits, and we want to expand capacity and build resiliency. So we'll be trying to keep that balance, but, every budget year will be an opportunity to talk it through and ask why and move things up or move things down. We also have situations like happened, I can't remember if it was when it was, where we had that massive rainstorm like never before, and we identified 5 areas where we had flooding that we never had before. So that then became the priority. So we could have a plan in one year, and then we have to pivot because we're having private property damage.
Okay, well, thank you so much, and thank you to LIDC for this great work and presenting it all to us tonight. And we definitely look forward to upcoming conversations as part of the budget around how we want to prioritize this work. And again, just, being mindful of the fact that for folks at all levels, 26 is going to be a difficult budget, primarily due to expiration of a lot of COVID relief funds. So I'm looking forward to that discussion. So thank you so much. We're going to move on to the next agenda item. Can we get through the voting session real quick, and then we can take a break? Yes. All right. All right. Well, we're gonna get to the voting session. All right. So the first voting item is a resolution adopting the hazard mitigation plan.
So moved.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Fulshaw. Thank you so much, Councilmember DeBala. Are there any points of discussion or questions?
We do have some follow-up, not ready this evening, but we will be providing a short memo to council as a follow-up to some of the questions that came.
Great, thank you so much. All right, seeing, and just as a reminder, those questions were more about coordination, not necessarily relevant to what we're voting on right now. Thank you so much, Deputy City Manager. All right, so All those in favor of the resolution adopting the hazard mitigation plan, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Do we have any opposed? Any abstain? Okay. All right, so we're going to move on to the next item. And I'm going to turn things over to city management to just give a quick lead in to the resolution authorizing the city manager to execute the national opioid settlement agreement with Kroger/Harris Teeter in the opioid litigation and Maryland subdivision agreement.
Thank you, Mayor. So there's a process by which the state manages settlement agreements related to opioid litigation. The short of it is the state has to agree to participate in a settlement. After the state agrees, then there's a process by which subdivisions also have to agree to participate. The agreement to participate is what we're asking council's authority to execute. Once we do that, then we're eligible for the opioid settlement dollars that'll come to the city. The estimated amount for the city is very small. It's $8,000. And the programmatic uses are limited to prevention of drug use and resolution of drug impact. So we're asking the authority from council for the city manager to execute the agreement. It has to be executed by tonight. We received the document on Monday with a short turnaround time, which is why it came very quickly onto the agenda.
Great. Thank you so much for that lead-in. Would someone like to move?
So moved.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Fulcher. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Gibson. All those in favor of the resolution authorizing the city manager to execute the national opioid settlement agreement with Kroger/Harris Teeter and the opioid litigation and Maryland subdivision agreement, say that 10 times fast, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, thank you all so much for pushing through, and we will take a quick 10-minute break. Thank you all so much. All right, thank you all so much. We're entering the home stretch. And so the next item on the agenda is the traffic calming requests. So we'll have Director Braithwaite to talk about the traffic calming requests that we had the public hearing on today, or public hearings, the speed hump requests for Westmoreland, and traffic calming in Hillwood Manor.
I'll start with the Westmoreland one, since that we have residents here for that. Do we also, the person left for Hillwood Manor, so I think we're good with doing that second. As you've already heard, we had a collaborative process in evaluating potential traffic calming on Westmoreland. And I do want to point out, because it could be confusing to some, this particular request and the Hillwood Manor one were received before July 1st. So they're being evaluated in the old administrative regulation system, which is why they had a petition process. It's why we have a public hearing. It's why we have the 2 reading ordinance. In the future, that's not the way the system is set up for traffic calming. So just want to point out, in case people are asking why, or I thought we got rid of this. We received it before June 30th, so that's why we're going through it. I met with residents on Westmoreland Avenue after receiving the petition, and we had, as I agree, a very productive walk through the block. And there are some general conditions that we look at when we're looking at traffic calming. The city code does define certain requirements or recommendations associated with where speed humps or traffic calming can get installed. We specify how far from a stop sign. We specify that it can't be in front of a driveway apron, can't be on a cul-de-sac. The distance between speed humps, 150 to 300 feet. So there are some arbitrary guidelines that we follow. So when I first received the request, they just said speed hump in these 2 blocks, and then looking at the long first block from Walnut Elm to First Avenue, it became apparent to me that this would be a place where you'd put 2 speed humps based on the length of the street, and that 1 speed hump would actually end up in that situation that we have. And the reason we have those guidance for distances between speed humps is that people will speed up to it, hit it, and speed down, whereas if you have enough interruptions over the course of a block, people tend to do a little bit less of that hitting the gas and then hitting the brake and hitting the gas. Some drivers will still do it, but the idea is to create a road condition where you just naturally drive a safer speed. So if you can see these things coming in the future, you'll slow down and you won't speed up and stop. So that's, you're dealing a little bit with psychology and human behavior, which it's anybody's guess on that. But the goal is to create the visual cues that will keep drivers driving a more consistent lower speed over the course of the block as they drive through. So that's the reason for the 2 speed hump recommendations in the first block. The second block is much shorter, more appropriate for a single speed hump. We did spend quite a bit of time looking at where the speed hump should be. I came out with some recommendations just based on my knowledge of the street and based on aerial maps and seeing where driveways were. And in talking with the residents, they said we think it should be here rather than there. And so we were able to accommodate and make those kind of adjustments, which is really a perfect world where you can kind of work with residents and develop a system that is collaborative and helpful. We also were able to identify a couple other things that the neighborhood thought would be helpful, and I do agree. We had a very old pedestrian crosswalk sign at one location before First Avenue. So we're going to turn that into a children at play sign. And then there was another location right at the curve of Westmoreland where we thought a children at play sign would be very appropriate. And lastly, having lived on Westmoreland, I know that street real well, and that curve can be tricky because people don't drive on their side of the road. They sort of forget that it's a 2-way street and just kind of cruise in the middle. And so we have a number of streets like that where it's been very helpful to paint a center line particularly on curves where you don't have full sight line as you're going through. So it's our recommendation to add a center line to the roadway. It does slow traffic, as well as remind people that the road is two-way and there really is a lane for them to be in, which isn't the middle of the road. I think that pretty much summarizes. We're also going to add the crosswalk markings at the Walnut and Elm intersection. Those aren't considered traffic calming, so we'll install those anyway. And they used to be in place, but I can't remember if it was WSSC or Washington Gas. At any rate, the last utility work through there removed the painted crosswalks. They weren't the Continental style, they were just a double parallel line. So we'll go back with Continental style crosswalks because the proximity to schools is close enough that Continental crosswalks are really, and by Continental, zebra stripe, 2 feet wide, every 2 feet, perpendicular to the roadway. They're very much visible. They actually wear less because of they're in line with roadway, with driving, so they tend to last a little longer than the horizontal lines. So we will go all 4 sides of the intersection with crosswalk markings. And I think that pretty much summarizes the thought process so far on that particular request.
Councilmember Gibson?
Yes, thank you, Director. I have spoken with the folks that presented the petition, and then you walked through it, and they expressed their gratitude for your, as you said, collaborative, I really appreciated that, and with your recommendations and your knowledge. I just wanted to do due diligence to the concerns that were raised about the trade-offs with speed bumps, and just could you speak to that issue in terms of the emissions? I guess as long as we're using gas cars, there'll be some emissions there. Could you speak to that? I think out of due diligence.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have a full range of understanding about emissions related to driving and stopping and starting. I trust the information that was presented here from the resident and appreciate that. It is a concern that get raised anytime we talk about speed humps, because although, as I mentioned, what we try to do is design them in such a way that we reduce the likelihood of people hitting the gas, hitting the brake, hitting the gas, hitting the brake, because they can see I'm going to just keep doing this, so why don't I just drive 5 or 10 miles an hour and get through the block? So the goal is to create enough visual clues to just slow drivers down consistently through a block. It doesn't always work that way. Speed humps of a certain distance apart will generate that, for some, the urge to race between them. And when you're hitting the gas, you're gonna spew carbon emissions, most definitely, and particulates. It likely is similar to what's already happening with vehicles driving quickly on the street. For those vehicles that are driving over the speed limit or even at the speed limit, those emissions are still in place. So it is a balancing act, and there is not a perfect solution.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gibson. Councilmember Small?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. And I'm curious about this for one particular reason, and it is the descent. Because in theory, if the layout here is essentially the 3 speed bumps, and one of the concerns is that maybe one of the speed bumps isn't necessary, and there's both of the sort of groups offered the raised crosswalk, which I also think is technically sort of just like a ninja-fied speed bump. And so I'm curious about whether or not we can we can flip that or add that in the process as it stands from in here. Theoretically, if everyone agrees on a raised crosswalk there for the 3rd one, then can we do that from the days or not?
Yes, we could certainly add to the ordinance that specifies the traffic calming requests. We looked a bit at that when we were walking around. We talked about a raised intersection versus just raised crosswalks. It's a very complicated intersection.
That's what I'm
Roads don't
asking about.
come in, they don't come in on a nice square, nice cross. There's angles, there's stormwater inlets, they're off-centered. It's a kind of a wacky, weird, so it really doesn't lend itself well to a raised intersection because of the odd nature of the intersection itself.
So there's idiosyncrasy. It's been a long day. There are idiosyncrasies about this one
Yeah.
that make the dissent valid, but not necessarily applicable.
Yeah, right. We do look at opportunities for raised intersections. It can help. Actually, what it's intended for is to, and raised crosswalks, increase the visibility of pedestrians more than make cars stop at stop signs. So really, raised crosswalks aren't intended to make cars stop, though it does sometimes have that effect. It really is to make pedestrians more visible to drivers. We took a look at the raised crosswalk there, again, because of the odd length and the arrangement of the intersection. If we pulled it up on GIS, you'd kind of see what I mean. It really doesn't lend itself well. The other challenge with raised crosswalks is that your stop bar has to be 4 feet behind the crosswalk.
Okay.
So a raised crosswalk in and of its nature is going to take more footprint. So you have to elevate up to 3 inches, which is usually over 6 feet. And then you have to have the width of the crosswalk itself, which is minimal 6 feet. So you end up with a very wide space, and then your stop bar has to be in front of it. So it then creates sometimes unintended consequences of, because the stop bar is so far back from the intersection, nobody stops at the stop sign because they're just rolling their way through. So it's, each location has its own particular nature. In this case, I think continental crosswalks are the best visual clues we can get to protect pedestrians, and I think it will have and hopefully a consequence of making the stop signs and the fact that this is an intersection with lots of activity more awareness for the drivers.
I just like to conclude, I would just like to say I really appreciate that as an answer. And I'm thankful that you were able to give that answer while the people were still here to hear it. Do you?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
You're at first.
Just in Westmoreland, with a raised crosswalk, I think it's not Walnut.
Could you speak to that, Daryl?
Yeah, sure. At First in Westmoreland, that's not an area that I'm familiar with the intersection, but it's not one that what I thought about when I was out there. So we can certainly take a look. I'm assuming you would want them on all 4 sides or just 2 sides, or where do people walk? I would typically think crossing first is where you'd have the elevated or the.
We need to think about that.
Yeah.
It's like a visitor, something to look at and talk about.
Sure. Yeah, happy to meet with residents out there. Again, we try to match the use. So in this case, and also try to figure out what problem we're trying to solve. I can tell you, rolling through stop signs is a chronic problem, particularly if you have visibility. If a car coming up to a stop sign can see that there's nobody coming the other way, 99% of the time, myself included, I don't come to a full stop, right? We all know we should, but we can see there's no cross traffic, so we just go about our day. So it is a real challenge, and it could be that raised crosswalks could help in that situation.
And then Daryl, I apologize. The very last thing about this is that one of the things that was addressed was talking about enforcement at corners, and that's one of the things that happens periodically in Wildwood. I know Chief isn't here to talk about these things, and one of the things that he says is that resources and whatnot. So I don't know if he's watching. Sometimes he is, but how do you guys? Could you just talk to the issue of the coordination between
Sure.
what you guys do and what the police do when it gets to public safety? Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. And in case like that, if we hear from residents, say, people are rolling the stop sign, I wish the police would enforce, we do share that information with the police department. There's a sort of a traffic detail of folks that we work with regularly, Officer Sims and Michelle Holmes and others. So we share that information, and vice versa. If they get a complaint that they think would be helped by improved signage, improved roadway markings, they let us know. It's always a problem to, that it's a high priority issue. My guess is First and Westmoreland, particularly because First is like two dead end streets, so you don't have much cross traffic, is not going to raise itself up to a level of high enough traffic volume for the police to identify it as a high priority area. That being said, they are at Walnut Elm, Westmoreland, because we've gotten lots of complaints and Nest door camera videos of people rolling the stop sign. So people are actively feeding that information to the police. And as long as they're there, they could certainly visit the other intersection. But we've said this a lot tonight. There's sort of a balancing act of needs. And
That's a fantastic answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Small. Councilmember Honzak.
Hi, yeah. I want to share that I appreciate how hard everybody's worked on this traffic calming request for both of them, actually, and that there are a lot of small children living in these areas. I have 3 children myself, and live in front of a stop sign that my son sits on the porch and blows the whistle for 20. Now he's 18, but did it. Every one of my children's done it. The sad part about Ward 5 is people don't stand up and come in here and complain enough. And I'm feeling myself really emotional actually tonight listening to all this. And but I appreciate it. So I appreciate this as grandfather, but I'm saying this to make a point, and I want everyone to hear me. And I've said it before, but it's been a few years. So I don't believe we should wait for collisions and accidents to happen before we install traffic calming. I can see clearly on the map, because I'm a map and a data-driven person, and I can see there's a gap on the map where you want the traffic calming. So I think if I lived there, that's what I would want to. And if I saw the children in my neighborhood, young children moving into, I would want that also. So I support these requests, and I know that we're looking at a different set of policies moving forward. But again, I want to remind everybody where we're at right now as a city. I just took the trouble to look at the map quickly and the distribution of traffic calming, and I'm thinking about our resource distribution across the city. I also looked again at the interactive crash map, and those are 2 amazing resources. So there's just a huge difference between wards 1, 2, and 3 and wards 4, 5, and 6. There are 50, I just hand counted just now, 54 speed bumps, Ward 3, 47, Ward 2, 53, Ward 1. In wards 4, 5, and 6, where we have some of our densest and most pedestrians and a hell of a lot of children, we have our schools there. We have only 13 traffic calming devices in Ward 4 that Terry represents, with all of our tall Maple Avenue buildings next to our schools. Thank you for getting the stop sign placed there. In Ward 5, we have 7. Please hear that number. In Ward 6, we have 31, and I hear about the tens of thousands of cars passing through. And I just, please, when requests are made in the future and they come in, I hope that lots of citizens will show up. I hope that maybe some of you will get some of your neighbors to come out and help be allies of our neighborhood, that they need some people who have the time to be here tonight and help us out to make these requests, because we really, really need help. I cannot do this alone. And I would love it. I know you're really great about coming out when people ask you, but my neighbors just don't always ask. And if they want some little extras, like a raised crosswalk, or they haven't thought of it and they don't have the time to get creative, can you help us solve those problems? I'm begging you, please. 7 traffic calming in Ward 5. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Honzak. Councilmember Fulcher.
Thank you. just for your all knowledge, because it's something that we've talked about here, the only people allowed to have stop sign cameras right now, you're allowed to have them in Prince George's County. Please keep on advocating to your state representatives that we would also like to be able to have stop sign cameras in Tacoma Park, because the enforcement will only work as long as somebody sees a police officer there and then they're gone. Whereas we know people are not happy about getting tickets in DC because of stop signs. I myself have considered going into Waze and like warning people about the stop sign cameras, even though they're not there, and then maybe just doing that a couple times a day. So, I guess I had a couple questions. I'm going to keep on bringing up like bike lanes and road diets forever as far as, traffic calming. Although I don't know, like Westmoreland already feels like a diet. Like it's so narrow. I just don't understand like what people are thinking going fast on that road in the first place. And so I don't think that I would have been begging for a bicycle lane on there, but just something to keep on considering when we're looking at speeding. And I'm just kind of wondering,
So it could just very well be the traffic counts may not substantiate, substantial number of patrols in terms of that particular stop sign, but we can ask him
Sure.
to check.
Yeah, before we come back for first reading, I will hopefully have met with residents to talk about the raised crosswalk, and then I'll see if the police can provide any data in terms of most recent traffic enforcement, or if they do it on a quarterly or annual basis, just sort of frequency of patrols and those kind of things.
Yep, that would be helpful. All right, so that's Westmoreland. And I think we're going to move on to Hillwood Manor.
Green light on.
And let me just quickly
I got nothing
say,
to say about Hillwood Manor, green light, all of them, yay.
yeah, I'm particularly happy about this
Thank
because
you.
it's finally traffic calming that's not speed humps. Yay! So, yeah, in working with the neighborhood association, who first came to me with sort of like, we feel our neighborhood's neglected, we did street signs, they made a stop sign request, city manager approved, so we were talking a lot about improvements to the neighborhood, and I raised to them, because I'm always looking for ways to get some traffic calming in that's not speed humps. I said, what do you think about these really wide intersections, where people just roll wherever they want to roll? They're like 40 feet wide. And they bought it. So we have in front of us 3 road diets, which I love that term, intersection reconfiguration, where we're going to remove a lot of pavement, create a much more clear path for roads, for cars in both directions, much more defined intersections. So, and those are, the 3 locations are 13th Avenue and Elson Place, and 14th Avenue and Elson Place, and then 14th Avenue and Elson Street. So if you're familiar with Hillwood Manor, it's complicated: Elson Place, Elson Court, Elson Street, but they're all there. And happy to share the visual if that would help, and if the council would like to see it, we have them drawn out on a map, that would show what the road diet looks like and where the stop bars would be.
That would be great.
So I can make sure that's included for first reading. Okay.
All right, Councilmember Small.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say about this that I really appreciate this, both from the perspective of the community association working really effectively with you, but also just from the physical plant of the city. Because one of the things about that area is because that's in that in-between place where we were Prince George's County and then Montgomery County. One of the things about that is that structurally, the 2 jurisdictions don't necessarily build roads the same. And so I do think that there's some significance in doing this and making people know where the city is. And it also gives people the opportunity to have a safer environment to walk in. So yay. This is the kind of thing that excites me, because we have some structural physical plant issues, and we have structural issues that we can address for long-term solutions for positive benefit. So thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Small. All right, and I just want to echo my appreciation, because I know that community very well. And, Erskine is the busiest residential street in the entire city, which is in Hillwood Manor. Yeah, and all of the work that has gone in with the Hillwood Manor Park, and people are out and walking, but people are also, because they have one of the busiest traveled roads, constantly trying to figure out ways to navigate the neighborhood. So being able to kind of tighten things up, I think, will go a really long way to improving walkability in the community. All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Director Braithwaite. And we got you out before 10:30. Wonderful. So we're going to go into our last work session for the evening, and it is Youth Council appointment recommendations. And I'm going to am I turning things over to the Committee on Committees?
Yes.
The Working Group on Committees.
Okay, yes, just getting clear. I will be brief. So, the council subgroup that looks at appointment recommendations looked at 15 applicants for 11 positions, which is pretty good for over the summer from high school students and middle school students. We got applications from almost every ward. We had 6 of the 9 current youth council members wanting to return.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. pretty cool. And we are recommending that they all be reappointed. We did consider what would it be like if one of them wasn't. And then from the remaining, we recommend 5 more, excuse me, 5 more. And the group is going to be pretty balanced ethnically, ward-wise, and to the degree we had applicants, and racially, and not as much as desired with middle versus high school students. It'd be nice to grow, but again, you only can work with what you've got in front of you. So next week we'll be asking you to vote on the appointments, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much to the Subcommittee on Committees.
It was fun.
For all of your continued work on moving our committees forward. And so with that, I think that's all we have for our agenda this evening. Would someone like to move for us to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you so much. Second. Thank you all. Have a fantastic night.